Well, Dr. Paul Mormon, Mr. Mark Side, we're here again. It's another year. Another year for GRT.
Happy New Year's to everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Mark, where are you at? You're coming in remotely. Where are you at?
Coming in. I'm in Solana Beach, California, a little bit north of San Diego. Had some meetings here, so drove out and excited to be part of a discussion with you guys before I run to my meetings.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're stoked to have you. Dr. Paul Mormon, hanging out, fireside. You in Tennessee or up there in Maine this week?
No, we're in Tennessee. It's just we're having a little cool down this week, so I got the fire pit keeping me warm on my backside. So
love it. Awesome. And y'all, I'm right here in New Orleans, Louisiana. Had a little cool front move through. We're starting to gear up for Carnival, Mardi Gras coming up here, Mardi Gras 2026. But y'all, it is great to get the gang back together for GRT. And to our viewers out there across LinkedIn, welcome to GRT in 2026 Adventures in Private Practice, y'all. This is now year 5 of the GRT Summit, GRT Adventures, and we've got some really exciting announcements to share with the entire industry this evening as we get some really exciting things going on across the GRT Summit community, and what we think is just some really exciting times to be in vision and eye care. So in the context of this, kicking things off, Paul, been having a lot of deep conversations about just the state of optometry. And look, of the three of us here on this evening's webcast, you're there in the trenches, seeing patients day in, day out across your multi-location practice. And so maybe kind of kick things off, just kind of share your perspective of the state of optometry, the state of private practice these days.
Yeah, I'll tell you, 2025 was a tough year. I don't know how the rest of the United States was looking, but here in Memphis, Tennessee, it was a little challenging with, some of the economy things that have changed, some of the just struggles that, people are having. So we have actually had to really dive back into, like some day-to-day management of our practices. And that's one of the things we'll talk about tonight. Something that, we always look at, Eric, and, this, we'll get a little bit more into this, but we're always worried about growth, grow. Every year it's like you said, if you're not growing, you're losing, and be honest with the people out there. We did not grow this year. I mean, we kicked, fight, scratched for, every little bit we could to stay pretty much level. But we purposely, what we found is that one of our practices, our main practice, we were growing too big, and we were losing some of our culture. We were having trouble with some of our staffing. So in 2025, we purposely drove it back down. We personally put it back down and pushed out to some of our satellite practices just to help them grow. So overall, we were even down in the main practice, grow up in the others, but we were able to, change our main location to like get back to where we were culture wise 5 or 6 years ago, even pre-COVID, and then boost some of the other practices. So that's something that I'd really like to talk about. And, hear Mark's, some of his feedback from that, he goes to all the meetings that are out there. So I know what's going on in my practice and my partners and associates, but I don't know what's going on. I don't love to hear what Mark says across the board, across the U.S.
Absolutely. Well, we're a company, and really feel aligned with the client, the customers, which are the practices, and feeling like, trying to build, maybe as entrepreneurs, we really feel that alignment. And so when we're out there, we're hustling which provide value to the attendees, for which are the ones we need to be present at, and yes, we can to so we can help. And so I think we go to a pretty wide range of meetings, from your expos to your regional meetings, selectively, not all of them, of course, to your sort of.
I think we had an issue there with with Mark. I think there was a little audio issue there, Paul. But to pick up this topic, right, of 2025, and it truly was a year of a lot of uncertainty out there in the marketplace. And our approach to this, we look at the business in kind of these different kind of segmented arenas. And I really like to join you in kind of this assessment of getting back to basics, because I really do think we kind of perhaps found ourselves here these last couple of years with so much technology, so much advancement, so much expansion, a lot of amazing, exciting things to celebrate. But by the same token, perhaps 25 was a year of adjustment where we realized, well, we're maybe being spread a little too thin. Let's kind of bring it back to basics.
Yeah. And I think as our OD friends that are on this webinar or cast, whatever we want to call it, I think it's like important for everybody to look at their business, what they do well, where they really thrive. I mean, we all get into these modes of, you go to a meeting and there's a new shiny piece of equipment out there, and we all kind of feel like we got to bring that in. So-and-so has it. This person has it. This person's talking about it. But Eric, I have so many pieces of equipment that sit in a closet because it just doesn't mesh with our demographics. Sure. So, there's a couple of pieces of equipment that I'm still paying a payment on, but we're really not using it. So that's kind of what we have really dived into, is like, what do we have that we can really, kind of utilize more in our practice? What do we have that maybe we don't really need? And as I was talking to Mark pre-meeting, it's like, we can't be too proud to be like, look, we bought this piece of equipment. It really doesn't work. Let's try to trade it in and get some money out of it versus not using something. And, and the same thing goes with technology. I think we all see these new technologies that come out. There's some great stuff out there. Please don't, I'm not pointing out any certain piece of technology, but there's so many things out there where it feels good to bring it in, feels really great to bring it in. And then there's some stepping stones, or there's some, pitfalls to bring it in, whether it be staffing, whether it be, do I have somebody to do this? Do I have somebody that can do it? Do we have the patient base to do it? So that's where we're really like retaking our practice back, if you will, of looking at what we do really well, what we can do really well, and what we don't need to be doing anymore, or don't need to be focusing on.
Yeah. Hey, Mark, we had lost you. No, we had lost you there. But to get back to that, and by the way, we were just kind of unpacking what you were digging into, which kind of ties back to, and I suppose the conversation kind of shifted to getting back to basics, like the opportunity for private practices in these adventures in private practice, right? But to get back to basics, kind of, really discover what is right in your practice, for your demographic, for your workplace, for your culture, and really zeroing in on that. Now, to that end, I know as you've launched the Newlands brand and met with practices across the nation, what kind of things do you see in practices that tend to be really focused and continuing to catch some of the growth from a market fit and kind of systematizing? Walk us through a little bit of a rubric you've observed, and also perhaps in your experience outside of eye care, right? Because I think for a lot of our listeners out there also, they just associate you with Newlands, whereas you have an entire career outside of eye care as well that perhaps can lend some insight here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sorry, I was fighting one signal bar. I found myself a place with three. So hopefully that'll do the job. Yeah, I came as an outsider, come from really corporate finance, always focused on healthcare, probably 30 years of health technology. And that's brought me to kind of the venture industry, where we invested in a number of health technology companies, including Newlands. And that was probably 6 or 7 years ago. And then circumstances arrived where there was an opportunity for me to step in and try to lead the growth. And so I've been doing that for several years now. And so really coming at it from an outsider. And like I said before, as a small company, I think for us to be successful, we have to, not to talk about our product, which I won't, but to talk really about observations of an outsider to an industry where recognizing you have many different practice profiles. We know that. I mean, you obviously have your full scale exams to, to frames to, that whole, the traditional business. You have specialty practices that focus on specialty services. You have the ones that operate out of a corporate center and just do the healthcare. I mean, there's so many different, profiles that we try not to walk in and say, this is the model that works for you. We try to really understand what's the patient need, where we think there's a very large unmet need. Again, forget our product, just in general, we think there's enormous unmet patient need in the, regardless of the practice profile. In their community of patients, we know there's a lot more business that coincides with better patient care. And so if we can be part of delivering that for almost no investment cost and without having to change a team in terms of who you hire or create some cumbersome training or anything like that, and where you have to feel like you're selling to your patient, because I think that's another theme in optometry, is that practices often don't like to feel like they're selling their patient these certain treatments. And the reality is there's a lot of patient need that if we can help as a ally of the practice, show the practice how much value there is to give to that patient, give them tools to make it easy for their staff to do it, and then turn it into a situation where the patients are pulling the services rather than the practice pushing them. That is a beautiful thing. Again, we're, I think, a great example of how to do that. I'm not saying we're the only one, but it ties into the fact that there's so much patient need that if we can step back a little bit, look at the unmet opportunity, in our case, ocular surface, which can be found at the eye exam. There's other opportunities, of course, that we're talking about in terms of other specialty services that can be very well brought in if you use the right technology and approaches. And it doesn't mean spending a lot of money. There's a lot of great ways to do it without spending a lot of money. So those are the themes that I really hone in on, is how do you take a practice without making a big investment of time, money, people, and be able to tap into a huge new revenue source that coincides with, really a large unmet patient need. And I think that's the win-win that I see going from 100 to 800 offices for us in the last year. That's what seems to be creating that reality where we're just growing very quickly.
Yeah. Interesting you say that, Mark, also, because I know a conversation that Paul and I were having recently was about the changing demographics in his market. Paul, why don't you speak to that? Because I know this is something that practices are facing in markets across the nation, the changing demographic. To Mark's point, provide the scope of care and services that the demographic wants and needs, but that can be hard if the demographic is a moving target. So why don't you speak to kind of what y'all have observed in your practice, Paul?
Yeah. So, I graduated in 2001 and came in to the practice that I'm working at now and part owner. And we had multi-generational patients. So we had, the parents, the grandparents, and then the kids. So we had these 3 generations, and we were seeing, so out of one family unit, we might see the aunts and uncles, we might see 20 patients, and the people that were then, now my age, so 50, their parents are, getting older, and then the kids. So here's the thing. This is the thing that you really have to look at. There used to be a statistic that, like, how much percentage of people would come back and live within 100 miles of where they grew up. And that is a changing demographic. So, and I can tell you this personally, because I have 3 children and none of them live in Memphis. None of them live in Memphis. So sure. If the kids in your practice go to a 4-year college, I'm not saying anything, but just there's even a lesser chance that they're going to come back. This is affecting like rural communities, probably more than anybody, is, because kids have a little bit more opportunities. They're going to these 4-year colleges and they get a feel for a bigger town. They get a feel for, more cosmopolitan life, whatever you want to call it. but they don't want to go back to their hometown. So we're losing a little bit on the younger end of our practice. So we have to like adjust to these, like 50 plus people. Like, what do they need? What do they need? So it may not be so much contact lens as we focused on a lot early in my career. Now we're shifting more towards medical. So it's like, well, as with a lot of people, but what can we do? And Mark has this great, kind of a program or like kind of like protocol for a practice where you get your patients back every 6 months. So it's like the dental model where it's like gone. We need to be gone of the days.
I just got off the phone, by the way, with 2 different offices who have their patients are coming in every 2 to 3 months. Just to put that out there. And but you're right. I think 6 is sort of like that good sort of right straight down the middle of the fairway. Everyone can kind of get their brains around that. And what happens is, depending on the service that you're offering, if there's real patient demand for it, there's real strong receptivity, they'll even come back more often. And if you have the right setup using sorry to interrupt you, but that if the right staff, technician staff in particular, we can leverage them, it's a beautiful thing. And I'll save my other point for later, but I sorry, but that was just interesting. I just got off the phone with someone talking about that. So anyway, but take it over.
Thanks for jumping in, man. That's what we want. I should say this from the very beginning. None of us are professional. We want this to be a fun, interacting dialogue. We want people that are watching this to be like, those guys are fun. They have good information, but we're not selling anything. We're not, we're not telling you how to run your practice. We're just telling you how to think about your practice. How to rethink about your practice. And getting back to the demographics. So like I have less, kids than I ever have had, less young adults because they're just not coming back to Memphis, Tennessee. They're going to Dallas. They're going to Atlanta. They're going to Charlotte, Nashville. So those of you guys are in that areas, congratulations, because you've got these young docs or young professionals coming into your practice. But those are also the folks that are doing more online. They're also the folks that are doing more outside of, our traditional optometry kind of models. So you better be ready to address some of that things too. And so getting along or getting back to just some of the things to think about. It's like really, there's you probably have a software solution in your practice that can go in and separate your demographics. So you can look at these different generational type things and get a good, assessment of your practice. There's a lot of things out there that can do it and just really rethink your practice, how you can address some of the changings of your demographics.
I think the root underlying thing we need to hit on, which was mentioned by both of you, is the changing business model of optometry. Because Paul, look, even what you said, getting big into medical. Okay, so we want to get into medical care. We've got all this amazing advanced training. We've invested in this equipment. Well, now who are the payors in medical? It's medical insurance. And what is happening over time here in the U.S. with medical reimbursements? It does not matter your specialty. It doesn't matter what you're doing. So even that, and that's why, and look, to our listeners out there, Paul mentioned it. It's very much what we're looking to do with this new series by GRT Summit is bringing on amazing experts like Mark Saad for engaging conversations around the really big issues we need to be tackling in private practice. So it really begs this question of that business model. And again, if those reimbursements are going down, we need to find ways to make up for that. Mark, with the work that you guys are doing, and again, as you know, you signed on the line and coming on here. We're not pitching product. We're having thoughtful conversation. But to that end, let's face it, this is totally in you all's world of really changing the business model. Why is that the driver? Let's start there. Even why is it so important now to get doctors to embrace this?
Well, I kind of come at it as a Neanderthal. and it's kind of trying to put together, I mean, coming at it, and there's just some obvious things. And one of the obvious things, when the data is telling it, the real world is telling it. And again, I will stay away from a product, but just in terms of the general area of ocular surface, you literally will, if you just, what is it? If you just stick your fishing rod in the water, you're going to pull out a fish. Almost every single time you look for it, you find it. And almost no practice is looking for it. And the reason why no practice is looking for it is the patient oftentimes doesn't know they have it. And if, like, just, if you wait, it's akin to as if we waited for our teeth and gums to hurt to show up at the dentist. That's where we live in optometry, where there's so much ocular surface damage going on that's quiet, it's under the radar, your patients don't know it, but they basically all have it. And they will not be receptive in general if the only thing you have to offer them is a super expensive treatment. So that has dissuaded a lot of practitioners from getting into something that I think is that huge need that patients will pay for, that will dramatically improve the profitability and success of your practice. But if and only if you have a treatment that hits the value mark for the patient relative to the cost.
Sure.
And so because almost nothing is reimbursed in this space, you get reimbursements with your 99 codes and, follow-up visits. And yes, there is reimbursement, but by and large, the technologies have not made it easy for the doctors to provide high value at low cost. It's high value at high cost. And there's a market for that. But there's in my view, a much more exciting market to go from 1% of the population to 90% of the population. If you can bring high value to that patient, that's affordable to them and profitable to you. It's just that easy triangulation of it's win-win. Everyone's got to win. And there are not many technologies that I think have done a good job of making it easy for the doctor, make it easy for their staff, and make it obvious to the patient. So that's where I come from. And if it's our space, that's what we're trying to do with our product, to make it obvious to the patient, easy for the practice, and where everybody wins. And I think if you look at different subspecialties in eye care, you're going to find that if you think about it in that way, where how can we provide that high value, but at the same time without setting up ourselves for failure? Because to Paul's point earlier, now we've just leaped into all this equipment that was a great idea at the time, but it's probably not going to lead to the success we're looking for based on whatever circumstances that practice has. So I think looking at everyone individually, I think there's ways to connect those dots, provide high value to the patient in a way that's very efficient and profitable for the practice. And it's out there. And so in our case, we're showing that hundreds of times over in this last year. And so bringing that story out and showing what's possible is just awesome. So that's kind of a way I'd look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting what you said regarding the value piece. It's a recent reports from the National Retail Federation, and also here in Vision, the Vision Council reporting 2026 is the year of a value-rich experience. And, that's what I believe we all realize in private practice. That's it, right? We know that patients prefer going to a private practice when they can over these other environments. Why? It's the experience. It's the relationship. It's that doctor-patient relationship. It's the authenticity of that entire journey. And in this world where so many things are moving so fast, this is what folks are seeking. Now, that said, we still need to adapt and show up to meet them where they are. And I think this very much hits what has been kind of a theme of this conversation, which is patient demographics. And I suppose from my seat and hearing, Paul, you share about what you've observed across your 4 locations in the greater Memphis market, and Mark, what you've observed going from 100 practices to 800 practices that are now Newland's offices across the U.S. And obviously from my seat in Acrinos, in what we do on this business side with a lot of transitions and cold starts and growth, seeing practices from all angles, I believe our consensus is let's know our patient. The better we can know our patient, the more we can know about them and their lifestyles and their behaviors. And Paul, from a clinical standpoint, what are those systemic and greater healthcare needs? If we can really understand those patients, then make strategic decisions in the business to have these value-driven options. Because let's face it, if we're selective of what we're rolling out in the practice, and we don't have all this dead weight, we don't have all this extra expense, then now we can start talking about ways to pass this value-rich experience at a value price as well. Because again, I mean, it's early 2026. There's still a whole lot of uncertainty here in the marketplace, and obviously a big disconnect between Wall Street and Main Street.
Yep, and we've actually one of the things we've done, Eric, is we when we train our new associates, we have what we call reception room time. Okay, and that means when you are in between patients, don't sit in the back room, don't sit in your office. I mean, you can't sit back there and finish your charts. You got to do that stuff, but we say get out in the waiting room, get out and talk to people as they're walking in. Because I can't tell you how many times I've sat out in the waiting room and people have come in to pick up their glasses that I've just chatted with them, and other people see that. Other people that are sitting in the waiting room see what we do taking care of patients. So it's not just you only get the doctor when they're in the lane. Then that's the whole premise of what we're talking about is in the lane and in the trenches, how we can help doctors in the trenches. But sometimes you got to get out of the trenches and you got to get out in the waiting room and out in your reception room and talk to people as they're coming in. For example, when we have frame sales, we try not to see patients because we make all the doctors that are there sit out and welcome people as they're walking in, because you got to be real. This is the day where we're fighting for patients staying in our practice. You know what I mean? And we've got to be different as to your point of you got to be out there and you got to be real. You got to be a real person. You can't be just this guy that's sitting there with his tie on and, very stuffy. You got to be out there really having personal relationships. And this is going to bleed over to what I wanted to talk about with the whole educational meetings, but I'll save that. But if you're not doing that, if you're spending time back in your room, checking on your scores, checking on whatever, my advice to you is to get out in your waiting room when you're not available and just talk to people.
I think you touched to that point. We work with everybody. We work with corporate. I'm working with a Walmart practice, who oftentimes is an independent owner who's subleasing out of a Walmart, or independent, true independent, or private equity, specialty. So I think across the board, and I think our community here under GRT is that independent. And the heat map of the 40,000 practices, as you can probably visualize, is there is pressure, financial pressure, to, see the private equity and the corporate grow. And I think the preservation of the independent is such an important thing. And you just touched on it, Paul. I think the advantage that our community here has to make that personal connection and create that, that special extra something that the community comes to your office, I just see it because I'm out there, I'm seeing the corporate practices, I'm seeing the private equity practices, and I see the struggle that they have in implementing anything, because the motivation amongst the staff, when even the doctors are employees, is very different than when it's your business, then it's your community and it's your passion. And so there is an unfair advantage that our community of independents has in terms of the organic and authentic engagement that the owner and his team has with their community. And you've said it, Eric. You've told me, I know, I'm not saying anything you don't know, but I'm out there seeing it. And so the conversations I'll have with a private equity practice or a corporate practice and helping them in more of a management point of view, like how do we get 20 stores to do this? It's a very different conversation than when you talk to that independent owner and you're talking about that patient's experience and how much value you can give that patient and how motivating it is for that doctor to tell his technician, hey, do this test on the front end. It's much more about win-win with the patient, where they really care about the outcome. They care about that practice's profitability in a very different way than you have, as you can imagine, in a more corporate setting. And so a long way of just saying, to Paul's point, what you're saying is spot on. And I think our community here has an unfair advantage to make that happen.
Yeah. And I think, to your point, Mark, I think everybody can have a private practice. So I think whether you're whatever modality you're working in, make it private, make it an independent feel. You're going to get more repeat customers. You're going to get more referrals. I mean, that is what, people ask me all the time. People come in and walk in the door. We want you to advertise in this. We want you to advertise in this. Where have you got your best advertising dollars? And I'm like, patient referrals. That is ultimately has always been our best referrals. Me supporting a local basketball team, a cheer squad, whatever it is. That is where we make the difference in our advertising dollars. And we give most of our budget to our community and our local groups.
One observation that I've noticed that it's again, not about us, it's about the doctors, that, when I came in to run New Lids, from being just the investor to being, an operator, one of the things I noticed was the original model was only selling a home kit that the doctor would sell to their patient. Conceptually, you could always make anything make sense, but in watching it in practice, it missed something. And what I realized was it was actually the treatment that was really profound, that was really life-changing. And so how do you leapfrog that, get rid of that sale and turn it into a service? And so we elevated the quality of the version that goes to the doctor that's being used by their technician. And instead of having 1 out of 100 of their patients buy this home kit, you're in a position where you can have 100 out of 100 patients feel the benefit of the treatment, which is transformative. And so what that did was it rapidly accelerated adoption. It confirmed that it's easy to deliver. It confirmed that it's very appreciated by the patient. And because the cost to the practice is so incredibly low, they're able to make a great margin at a price that's so affordable to the patient. That's where it gets into the win-win-win. So it was really an observation that the patients want the practice to do the service. And that was a really, eureka moment for us, that they want to come in for services, especially where they get an immediate benefit, rather than just, selling them something. And so I think we are learning as well, along with everybody else. And so once we learned that we had to go through our whole process to orient the company around supporting this high value, low cost service. But it's been, the most exciting thing is seeing it implemented successfully, and where you just see that win-win-win with the patient and the doctor, so.
Yeah. Y'all, so we had a comment come through here. Michael Healy, and I don't know if anybody knows Michael. He's out in Nebraska. He's the president of Professional Opticians of Nebraska, and he's a ABO certified speaker. But he hit it, right? He says that's gold right there. He talks about presence of the touch point that brings value, right? Seems trivial to those who aren't truly understanding the power of presence, right? It's like the chef stopping at the table. It's special. Mike, you hit the nail on the head. And Paul, I think this speaks to that point you were making. Again, Mike, thank you so much for dropping that note there in the comments. I think it speaks very much to Paul, as you have, kind of directed your team across your 4 locations. And Mark, to your point, seeing those practices, kind of what is separating the cream from the masses, and it's going to be those touch points, that presence. I'm a big fan, and you guys will hear me talk a lot about authenticity and that real connection. But it really is so powerful. And there's some really fascinating ways that we can do it now, and perhaps not to unpack in this conversation as we're kind of winding down, but then it's exciting to then look at how can technology enhance the authenticity and presence of things? And I think that's also perhaps one of the things that we've all kind of ID'd today, as far as when we're looking at 26 adventures in practice, where things go from here. Paul?
Challenging to think about bringing AI into your practice. I mean, I think it's like you have to be very careful. I think it's, here to stay. I don't think you need to like put your head in the sand and be like, it's not going to affect my practice. I think we need to like figure out ways to embrace it. I think some very smart people out there are talking about it. I think there's some, I think you have to like, just like anything else, you have to like think about it, digest it, and think about how it can be in your practice. Trust but verify is one of my favorite comments that I say within my group. But, I think it's here, and we've got to like figure out how to bring it in and embrace it. I will tell you one thing we talked about, as Mark was touching on. I read this great post in LinkedIn by Cal Clutie, one of our friends, and he's talking like, be careful about specializing too much. Be careful about over specializing or making yourself where that's all you do, because then you have to refer your patient to somebody else. And patients don't like when they have to see 3 different people for eye care. So yes, have that specialty, but still do all the nuts and bolts too. So don't get rusty on all the nuts and bolts, but kind of pull into your specialties. And that's where, Eric and I, you and I have always talked about, when you bring in an associate, make them the specialist in something. So you don't have to do it. Like you as the practice owner, or you as the, the lead doctor or the senior doctor, you don't have to specialize. You refer to somebody within your own practice. And that's what we've done as we brought in associates. Is we've got somebody who does myopia management, somebody who does specialty contact lenses and scleral lenses, somebody that does our dry eye management. We've got, and so it's all under our practice, but we don't have to send them out to do something else.
I love that point. I think there's the technologies out there, but across all those different specialties, to be able for any practice to be able to be of a certain level of competence and success in each of those areas, where it's almost like I always think about like Mount Everest. What is it, 29,000 feet? Not everybody needs to go to 29,000 feet. I think base camp's at 18,000. And so if you can get them to base camp quickly, profitably in a helicopter, you're going to satisfy the need for the vast majority. And for that extra 10% that have super complex situations, if that's not in your practice, well, sure, refer those. But every practice, whether it's myopia management, whether it's ocular surface, whether it's, scleral lenses, I think these are all great areas that the technologies are out there to be able to be base camp level without having to make a big investment. If you're going to go to the top of Everest, you might have to make the big investment, and that's okay, because you really want to specialize to that nth degree. That's great. Not every practice needs to do that, but every practice can get to base camp on all these areas, probably address 90% of the patient needs across those subspecialties, and not need to spend a lot of money to get into it, and make it extremely high ROI. And those things, just as a business person coming in, seeing that play out is really, really exciting. So this year we're not going to. I plan not to talk about the product much, not just here, but it's really much more about talking about practice success stories. That I feel like is so much more meaningful when you take different practices and different profiles and just showcase them. Let them explain what they did with their existing team without a huge investment, and how that's transformed their patient experience and their bottom line.
Outstanding, y'all. Fascinating conversation. I think we've kicked off what will be an ongoing dialogue, truly, all year here across GRT. As we're wrapping things up, I know, Paul, we have some just kind of updates and announcements as far as what all is in store for GRT in 2026. So, Paul, if you want to speak to some of that.
Yeah, I've got to look at my notes just so I don't want to miss any dates. But GRT Summit is now officially GRT Adventures. We've kind of made this, really like intentional change in the fact that we want your when you come to an event, we want it to be an adventure. We want your life to be an adventure. We want you have an adventure in business, kind of like growth. We want it to be something like really transformative. So hence the reason why everything from now on will be GRT Adventures. We have a couple of things coming up. So the first thing that we have is we're going to take a trip down to St. Lucia. So there's a group of us that are going down to St. Lucia between February 13th and 21st. So drop a line in here in the comments. Go to my GRT Summit like LinkedIn page. You can email me at paul@grtsummit.com. Yes, we need to change the email. I understand that, but that's coming. But if you want to come down and like really like wow your significant other, we're going to be down there over Valentine's Day. We're going to be doing some real cool things. We're going to climb Gross Piton. That's just one of those iconic mountains down there. We're going to do a jungle zip line. We're going to ATV on the beach, catamaran. We're going to do a river to ocean kayak trip. So a lot of cool things. And if you really want to go, I know we're getting close to crunch time, but if you want to go and really wow your spouse or significant other, I can give you some really discounted type room rates and stuff like that, because we have some that are still available. Along the lines of the GRT Adventures, every year, in addition to our meeting, I'm going to plan something that's non-educational based, just something really, really cool to do. So what we're going to do this year is a adventure out in the Southwest. So we're going to fly into St. George, Utah. So we spend the night in Zion National Park in one of the cabins or lodges there. We're going to do the whole Narrows. So when we were out in GRT 2022, we did part of the Narrows, or you got as far as you could go, but we're going to do the whole Narrows. So it's about 14 miles hiking in a slot canyon in the river. Then we're going to go to Bryce and do a Bryce hike, Bryce Canyon, jump over to Antelope Canyon. And we'll finish that, and then jump over to the north rim of Grand Canyon. Creme de la creme. I've been wanting to do this. I lost out on this opportunity during COVID, but we're going to do a rim to rim hike. So
wow.
So we're going to have we're going to start the north rim, jump down, go to the river, come up the south rim, and we're going to have somebody transport around, spend the night, have fun, just kill it. And then the next day we'll sleep in, fly home the next day. So that's going to be something really cool. That's our initial GRT adventure with no CE. Anybody can come. You don't have to be an optometrist. You don't have to be just whoever's out there in the space that really loves what we're doing and has been following us. You're welcome to join. It is all about connection, having fun together, just creating a culture of loving the outdoors. Then at the end of this year, or not at the end, but towards the end of the year, September 7th through 13th, we're going to be out in Yosemite National Park at the Rush Creek Lodge. Fantastic venue out there. This is our GRT Summit. So this is the OD meeting. Anybody is still welcome to attend. We've had people that come in as guests. We've had people that have come in just, hey, we want to see what you're doing. We not only do optometry education, but we also do personal education, business education. So it's applicable to anybody out there. So you don't have to be an optometrist. You don't have to be in the eye care industry. We'd love to have you. And we'd love to have people you got to be fun loving. You got to love adventure, and you got to be willing to share. You've got to be willing to share and connect with our group and just, really have a great time. The creme de la creme at the GRT Summit meeting this year, GRT Adventures meeting this year at Yosemite, is a summit hike of the Half Dome. So if you haven't ever seen it, go on to YouTube, Google it, whatever. You climb the cables up the last part of a Half Dome up to the top. You have to have a permit. We're going to have permits available for a limited number of people. So if you're interested in any of these things, St. Lucia being the most, right away kind of thing. February 13th to 21st. That's when we're going to be there. You can schedule it. You can do it shorter. You can do it longer. You can do a 4-day trip. You can do a 5-day trip. We've got a group going there. We're going to do some really, really cool stuff. But if you want to be involved in that, email me at Paul@GRT Summit, PAUL@GRT Summit, or you can drop a line or a comment in this group. Love to have you. Hopefully you've enjoyed this meeting. We try to be very raw. We try to be very we're not scripted. We're not in studios. This is not edited. We just, the three of us, we all have the same goals of we want to be successful, but we want to bring as many people along on our success story as we can. So hopefully if you're an optometrist and you're in need of some help, I would highly recommend Erich and his company to help you along. If you're looking for something to do to bring in or increase your revenue per patient, I would encourage you to talk to Mark Sad over there. Great equipment, great and just get into this rethinking the way you do optometry, because that is the way you're going to be successful, and that is the way we're all going to thrive in 2026 and beyond.
Outstanding. Yeah. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. If folks want to connect directly with you, continue the converson, mark@ulids.com.
That's it. Yeah, that'd be great. No, love to talk to anybody and just, learn their story.
Absolutely. And out there in LinkedIn land, y'all definitely connect with Mark out in LinkedIn. You heard it from Dr. Mormon. If you want to connect with him directly, learn about everything GRT Summit is up to this year, reach out to him at paul@grtsummit.com. And hey, if you want to connect with me, reach out to me via acrinos.com. You can ping me a note, eric@acrinos.com. But y'all, pull it all together, as Paul shared there kind of in conclusion, as we're wrapping up this GRT and 2026 Adventures in Private Practice. Stay tuned. Stay tuned for a lot of really exciting events ahead, as well as exciting programming, right? As we're going to have more webcasts of this nature right here in LinkedIn Live, where we pull in industry experts like Mark to just have engaging conversations about really important issues out there. So if you do have some ideas for some episode topics, drop them in the comments, send them on over to us, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the GRT Summit sometime here in 2026.
Best wishes.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, y'all.